Yo, what's up? It's your favorite neighborhood historian, Dilla. Today we're going to be filming and checking out the very awesome Logan Square neighborhood, a historic neighborhood on the north side of Chicago. And our guest, woo, baby. Can't wait to show you who the guest is today. This is You Don't Know Shy. Check it out.
Living in Chicago, God is in your favor. I'ma hold it down like call me an anchor. Think about my problems, deal with it later. Focus on my family and stack up all this paper. I am an emperor, God in the making. Every time I wake up, it's a celebration. Every time I wake up, it's a started from the bottom, y'all. Started from the
Chicago historian Dilla is a fascinating blend of modern historian and cultural worker. Dilla has become a Chicago social media sensation by going viral on TikTok. His 60-second history videos on everything Chicago have been viewed over 20 million times. Dilla has been featured on all manner of Chicago media and has also appeared nationally on both The Today Show and The Kelly Clarkson Show. As a proud resident of the South Side, Dilla lives by the saying that everything dope about America comes from Chicago.
Mayor Lori Lightfoot served as the 56th mayor of Chicago from 2019 to 2023. She was the first Black woman and openly gay person to hold the office. Before entering politics, Lightfoot was a lawyer and governmental official, working as a U.S. attorney and holding various reform-focused positions in Chicago's government.
What are you doing, man, in Logan Square?
Oh, well, I came to see maybe the most famous Logan Square resident we have right now. As you know, I call the mayor Auntie, Your Honor. Her daughter's the only person who I think has better shoes than me. And I thought we'd meet on your home turf. This is the Centennial Monument. This monument was dedicated on the 100th anniversary of Illinois, and a guy by the name of Henry Beacon is the gentleman that designed it. He's the guy that designed the Lincoln Monument.
Oh, wow.
So Chicago's good enough to get that guy to design this. So in Chicago, we have a neighborhood called Logan Square, and it's named in honor of General John A. Logan. He actually is the founder of an organization called GARD, Grand Army of the Republic. It was a Civil War veterans organization. He was a U.S. Senator. He was a proud Illinoisan. And in fact, he's a gentleman that changed Decoration Day, which was invented by African Americans, into what we now call Memorial Day. I'm wondering if you could tell those who may not know, how did you become a Chicagoan, and then how you ended up in Logan Square?
So I graduated from college, and I thought I was going to be either a history professor or a poli-sci professor, but then I started looking at how long it took to become a PhD and frankly the job prospects. Part of me was really wanting the kind of experience of being in a big city, not to throw shade at Washington, D.C., but it wasn't at that time. It didn't feel like a big city, and it definitely didn't feel like a place that I was going to spend the rest of my life. And so coming here, having come from a pretty small town, that's obviously in many instances less than the population, like a half a neighborhood in Chicago, I just was fascinated by the vastness of the landmass. I'd been to Chicago only one other time in my life, and we won't talk about that because I'm not sure the statute of limitations is run. I mean, I remember when I finally got a car driving around the city, I'm like, I'm still in Chicago? How's that possible? And I remember driving here the first time and thinking, where are we going? Little did I know that some years later, this would be my home.
So hanging out with the second ever woman to be elected as mayor of the city of Chicago got me to thinking about some of the other mayors that have represented our city. Back in the day, we used to elect mayors every year. And so a lot of characters would run for mayor. And did you know that 2 of our mayors were assassinated? Carter Harrison was killed basically on his front porch in the last weeks of the World's Fair. And Mayor Anton Cermak caught a bullet that was intended for Franklin Delano Roosevelt down in Florida. You all should have known, or maybe you haven't heard about a gentleman by the name of Richard J. Daley, Old Man Daley. At one point, he was the most important and powerful mayor in the entire country. We've had 5 mayors from a single neighborhood. Then our first woman mayor was an awesome lady by the name of Jane Byrne. She would cuss out news reporters without the blink of an eye. But for me, my favorite mayor of all time is the first black mayor of Chicago, a gentleman by the name of Harold Washington. He was so ahead of his time that as a state senator in the 1970s, he was advocating for the decriminalization of marijuana because he knew it was targeting young, poor black and brown folks. It's been challenging, but also awesome, being a citizen of Chicago with all of our strange mayors. So Chicago, a lot of people don't know, has a rich history with women's sports. Right, we invent roller derby here, the very awesome Dorothy Gators, most winningest coach in Illinois history out of Marshall. We formerly had our professional basketball team called the Chicago Hustle. Now we have the Chicago Sky, which, as I understand, you're a season ticket holder, even before all the Angel Reese and all of that stuff.
We were the OGs. I went to the very first WNBA championship game in Houston. I'm just a huge fan of women's sports because I think for so long, these women who had great athletic talent had no outlet past high school. There weren't a lot of college programs back in the day, now there are. And so to have this talent stay in the United States and be recognized for great athleticism.
I love how you put it, the talent gets to stay here formally. You know, there are so many pioneers to the women's game that didn't get to enjoy the success here.
The Chicago Sky select Angel Reese, LSU. Puts it up, you can count it!
These women are unbelievably gifted athletes, and if you really love basketball, they play it in the purest way. They pass, they post, they actually play defense, unheard of in the NBA. But this talent, I think, has given inspiration now because it's finally getting a spotlight shown on it. It's giving inspiration to girls at the youngest age. I go to the Sky games, and I always see these families that are there with very young girls who are wearing one person's jersey or another. That gives me hope and encouragement that, frankly, finally, Title IX is doing what it was intended to do, which is to level the playing field, give women an opportunity. Now, we got to pay them more, right? And I'm glad that they finally got charter flights. Whatever it takes to shine a spotlight on this incredible talent, let's have it.
The history of Logan Square, the neighborhood, finds its origins like a lot of Northside neighborhoods. For starters, Logan Square wasn't originally a part of Chicago. Most neighborhoods north of North Avenue belong to either Jefferson Township or Lakeview Township. They didn't get annexed into Chicago until 1889. The other thing about Logan Square is it has these big, beautiful wood frame houses, almost like mansions. And that's because they were constructed outside of the Chicago Fire Code District. After the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, houses and buildings constructed inside of the Fire Code District had to be made of fireproof material, which basically meant brick. So if you wanted to go build a big Victorian style wood frame house, you had to leave the official Chicago footprint, which is formerly what Logan Square sat in. Inside of Logan Square is Logan Boulevard, and Logan Boulevard is a part of the Boulevard system here in Chicago, also referred to as the Emerald Necklace. The boulevard system is a connection of roadways called boulevards, and every boulevard connects you to a big, huge park or green space. And so you can take, say, Loomis Boulevard, you'll hit Shermann Park or Ogden Park or Brainerd Park. You take Garfield Boulevard, then you go through Jackson Park and Washington Park and Gage Park. If you take Logan Boulevard, of course, you end up hitting up Humboldt Park. You can get to all of our big, huge parks by just staying on boulevards, and the parks that you pass represent emeralds on an emerald necklace, and that's why we refer to the boulevard system as the Emerald Necklace of Chicago. Another thing about Logan Square is, man, have some history makers live there. People like Jessica Camacho, the very awesome and great Newt Rodney of football fame. If you ever rode a bicycle, I'm sure it might have been a Swin bicycle, and the Swin bicycle founder also lived in Logan Square. I love a good Chicago brand, so thank you very much. Cheers. Sometimes, particularly in South Side spaces, folks would say, Mayor Lightfoot is mean. Now, how I would describe you is far from that, but as a very proud, openly gay black woman who's mostly moving in spaces where those things not only limit your opportunities, but have people trying you. Yeah. I say that far from mean, but just a person who you're not gonna play with because you know who she is. You have to be like made of steel to survive all of that.
Listen,
where did that come from?
I learned from a very early age that the cavalry wasn't coming to save me, right? As a young black girl growing up in the 60s and 70s, in a small town that was highly segregated with a family that struggled financially. We were kind of on a lower end of the economic status. If we didn't advocate for ourselves, we would have got nothing. And you're right, I was fortunate enough to travel in places that no one from my family was ever expected to be in, and oftentimes I was the only person who looked like me, only person who was a woman in many of these spaces. And if I didn't stand my ground, there are so many forces that tell you you're nothing, that you can't accomplish, that you can't achieve. And so, yeah, there was a narrative out there that, oh, Mayor Lightfoot's mean. No, I'm tough, and I have exacting standards. I just know that we can create a better pathway for our kids to follow, but we gotta fight for every inch of territory, and I understood that from my earliest years. Don't let anybody tell you you can't. Get that noise out of your head. And part of doing that is presenting yourself in a way that says, I'm here, I belong, and I'm gonna make sure that I get the resources, I get the opportunities that I deserve. But then don't deny me because of my skin color, because of my gender, because of my sexuality, because of my economic status. I'm not having it.
And that's how I feel a lot of times. I walk into space, I got my hat on, and they're like, that guy's a historian? Sometimes I walk in a space, a college, university, lecture hall. I'll have folks on my bus and they're ready for a tour from a historian, and then here comes lanky, 6'5", dreadlock, Jordan, fitted hat wearing Dilla. They're like, hey, where's the historian, right? As if urban folks can't be historians. I come across that all the time.
Known as Chicago's historian,
Shermann Thomas.
Shermann Thomas.
Shermann Thomas is an unlikely star.
I don't want anyone to take offense to this. You don't look like a historian. No. I mean, you don't, but
he's an urban historian.
He's an urban historian.
I used to want to combat against that and engage in a conversation. But what I know for a fact is that I've spent better parts of the last 20 years independently studying the history of Chicago. And I've probably read about 200, 300 books about Chicago history spanning multiple ethnicities, neighborhoods, demographics, origins. Historians have reached out to me and told me how much they appreciate my work. Here in Chicago, we have a gentleman by the name of Jeffrey Bear who works for our local PBS station. He is the Chicago history GOAT. And one day, while being interviewed about me, he said, I've learned things I didn't even know about Chicago from watching Dilla's videos.
Well, let me just say, I'm super proud of you, right? You are walking in a space that most black men don't walk in. And you're doing it on your own terms, which I think is incredible. And now, when all I gotta say is, oh, Dilla, like, oh yeah, I know that guy. I went on his tour and I did this and I did that. And, you know, your bus is now very well known going across the city. I'm proud of what you're doing.
Thank you very much. You were a huge supporter, one of the first people to kind of give me a nod to, hey, this guy knows his stuff, and that means a lot. Yo, thank you for checking out You Don't Know Shy. I'm your favorite neighborhood historian, Dilla. Special shout out to Mayor Lori Lightfoot. We getting Chicago mayors on this show. You gotta step your game up. That's why you need to be tuned in and tapped in. Thank you to the good people at Logan Square, the homie Jason for feeding us. Hey, one more thing, this is what you need to know. Everything dope about America comes from Chicago, the greatest city on earth. Till next time, peace.
Don't got no heart, I got an icebox. Brand new roller, swipe at the G-Shock. Moving slowly, I know the street hot. No more double, go ahead a detox. Yeah. Came from the trenches, they ain't showing us no love. Tagging in the city, all we wanted was a